Marcus Rashford is having his worst time as a Manchester United player.
But for Marcus Rashford, when it's not going well, it's your job to fix it.
There's been a major drop-off from last season in terms of goals and assists. Attitude and application problems on the pitch, and moments of unprofessionalism off the pitch.
Marcus Rashford being out in a nightclub.
There's growing rumours that he's going to be sold in the summer, and anyone watching Marcus Rashford at the moment can see that things just are not right. Is he being made a scapegoat for what is clearly a struggling Manchester United side? So let's just get into the numbers. 8 goals, 5 assists so far this season for Marcus Rashford, and it is almost May. It is undoubtedly a poor turnout from one of Europe's most bright stars when he is shining. The problem is, we are now seeing a player who hasn't shone for 2 of the last 3 seasons, and people won't let you forget it. Look at the numbers from last season. 30 goals in all competitions. The first time a Manchester United player has scored 30 goals in all competitions for a decade, since Robin van Persie did the same number in 2012-13. Marcus Rashford has the ability to have top-class seasons for Manchester United. He's done it before. We know he can do it. He's got the most goals of anyone since Sir Alex left Manchester United, and he's got the second most assists in that time as well. Only Bruno Fernandes has got more assists for Manchester United. He is undoubtedly one of the highlights of what have been a terrible time for Manchester United, but that doesn't seem to be saving him in terms of public perception. What has gone wrong with Marcus Rashford? So let's talk about public perception. Marcus Rashford was abused more times on social media than any other footballer in the world in 2021-22. He is regularly and routinely absolutely destroyed online, more so than most, if not all, other footballers in the world. That is something that does not reflect how good he has been for some of the years we are mentioning there. He has had a couple of very poor seasons for Manchester United, but for me, the idea that he deserves to be the most criticised and abused footballer in the world is absolutely nonsense. A sentence that we hear all the time is, there's a difference between abuse and criticism. That's what people say when they're having a go at Marcus Rashford. We've spoken about Rashford, we've spoken about how poor he's been this season. This line, there's a difference between abuse and criticism. One thing that people seem to fail to register is that constant criticism, whether it be abuse or not, constantly criticising someone over and over and over again, ends up being abuse. That is harassment. If you have a go at someone in the street time and time and time and time and time again, even if you're not abusive or racist or nasty in what you say, if you are critical over and over and over again, what does that amount to for the person you're speaking to? When Marcus Rashford opens his social media up, what does he see? Oh, it's only criticism, so it's fine. The fact that there's over 30,000 instances of abuse, and then I would assume dozens and dozens more times that of criticism and negative tweets that maybe don't cross the line into abuse. When he sees all of that, do you think he feels nice? Do you think he feels happy? Do you think he feels motivated? One thing that we've seen with Rashford time and time again is that he seems to be someone that doesn't necessarily respond particularly well to abuse, to criticism. He's more of an arm around the shoulder player. And I think that as United fans in particular, we should probably see that, and maybe, yeah, it's okay occasionally to say Rashford wasn't at his best today, that was terrible from Rashford today, but this whole thing of whether he plays or not, Rashford is the benchmark that United are judged by. I saw tweets going viral after games against Sheffield United, a game that, let's not forget, we were losing in. I saw tweets going viral saying, we can't play like this under Marcus Rashford. We can't play like this when Rashford's there. The reason we scored those 4 goals today is because Rashford wasn't playing. Yeah, it's not abuse, but that is criticism that is completely unrelated to what we're seeing in the moment. That is disproportionate to what we are seeing on the pitch. Not only are you criticising someone for their performances, but you are criticising them for performances they haven't even made. That to me crosses the line between criticism and harassment. I think a lot of what we're seeing is just unnecessary. Yes, on an individual level you can defend it and say, I didn't call him this, that or the other, But really, the purpose of a lot of the things we are seeing is to gain traction from people who do hate Marcus Rashford, who do want to abuse him, and will like your tweets and will go along with it. Even though we've not abused him ourselves, we are gaining attention from people who want to do that, and it is encouraged so much on social media. Another thing we hear all the time is, why don't you just delete your social media? And yes, he could do that. He absolutely could do that. But burner accounts exist. People communicate through social media. It's not 2012 when Twitter's this sort of fun thing that people use occasionally. Social media is the backbone of modern society. Everyone is on it. That's where you get your news from. That's where you chat to your mates. That's where people engage with each other more so than anywhere else. The idea that this whole raft of human beings are going to have to close themselves off from society. Let me do it again. The idea that all footballers are going to have to close themselves off from society for their 20-year career is just not realistic. We can all say, well, we'll just delete Twitter. Fair enough, that might work. But no way can you expect someone to never check social media for 20 years of their life, from being 17 to 37. That's just not realistic. Human beings are drawn to attention. He wants to know, everyone would want to know, what are people saying about me? I've scored a worldie. What are people saying about me? And a perfect example of that is his goal against Manchester City early in the season. 25 yards out, roof of the net, one of the best goals he scored for Manchester United. And after that game, because we didn't win, because he only scored one goal, he was trending and almost everything said about him was critical. And obviously you can mention, well, maybe he didn't track here, he didn't track there. But this idea that Rashford should have scored 2 or 3, otherwise he's a failure, when everyone else who played in that game seemingly got off maybe slightly more lightly than Marcus Rashford did. To me, it just feels bizarre. There is an obsession with Marcus Rashford. And I think one of the reasons for that is because he's from Manchester and because he is sort of seen as the physical representation of us Man United fans on the pitch. I think we see Manchester United almost through his eyes at times. He's been the face of United for the last 7 or 8 years. He's been arguably one of our best players in that time as well. I think that because he's from Manchester, because he's a United fan, we look at him and go, well, you're me. I find it more difficult to relate to Casemiro or Luke Shaw than I do to Marcus Rashford. He grew up a Manchester United fan. So in our heads we think, well, he should behave how we think we would. He should want to play for no money. He should be trying his hardest no matter what. He should put this team on his back and drag us to titles and to trophies and to wins and performances, against the fact that we've had failing managers, we've had a struggling team around him. He should be doing all of that extra stuff that we think we would do. But I think that's easier said than done, and not all players can be the Roy Keane. Those players are once in a generation, and maybe Marcus Rashford just isn't that player. Maybe he's a cherry on top kind of player who, when things are going well, he'll get you 25, 30 goals a season. Maybe the expectation that he has to be Manchester United personified is one that is slightly unfair and that isn't actually going to help us as fans or him as a player. Look at how Marcus Rashford has performed over the last 6 seasons. Since the 2017-18 season, Marcus Rashford has failed to score 10 Premier League goals only 2 times. And both of those times, United finished 6th. Both of those times, United were in turmoil on the pitch. And one way of looking at that is, well, if Rashford doesn't perform, the rest of the team doesn't perform. But the other way to look at that is, Rashford struggles to drag a failing team to success. And I think the idea that we put on him, that he has to drag this team to success no matter what, is one that looks to me like it's taking his toll on him. Maybe we can expect that from other players in history, and maybe Marcus Rashford isn't that guy, but that doesn't mean that we have to scrutinise and criticise and abuse him because he isn't as good as Roy Keane, or he isn't as good as Brian Robson. Maybe he's just a notch below that and we can appreciate him for what he is. And I'm not here to just focus on all the good things about Marcus Rashford and say that he's completely blameless for what we've seen from United this season. That isn't the case. We've seen him going out and getting drunk in Belfast hours before training and then missing that training session. We've seen him with, for me, terrible PR, responding to certain tweets, doing certain interviews at times before games he wasn't even playing. I think in other times, like that Players Tribune interview, he's answering questions that we didn't have as fans. We were saying, why aren't you tracking your man? Why do you look like you're disinterested? And he said, well, I could have gone to City when I was young. I'm loyal to Manchester United. We want to know why you aren't seeing it on the pitch, not why are you still here? And I think at times his PR has gone from being this kind of master that we saw throughout COVID with his free school meals, with everything he did at that time, to all of a sudden looking a little bit behind the story almost. He's kind of pushing the wrong angles and fighting the wrong fights. And I think at times it looks a bit disorganised, and that kind of fuels the fire again of, is he even bothered? I think whoever's in charge of Marcus Rashford's PR needs to have a look at their long-term plan for Marcus Rashford, because at the minute he seems like someone who is very reactionary. When he gets criticised, he will come out and say this is unfair, or he'll come out and do an interview where he proclaims his love for Manchester United, even though that's not really being questioned. He's a player that is one of the most experienced in Manchester United's dressing room, and yet he doesn't feel as though he's someone that speaks and acts with the authority that you would think that would afford him. I think one thing that could help him massively off the pitch is a vision for what Marcus Rashford is to the public. There isn't really a connection to Marcus Rashford in the same way you would see from Bruno Fernandes or players like that, or people in the past at Manchester United. Marcus Rashford has been at United for a very, very long time. He's been in the first team for a very, very long time. And yet the public perception of him isn't a person with that stature. He isn't a person who you think of as being one of the most grown-up adult players in the Manchester United squad. When Harry Maguire lost the captain's armband last season, not many people put Rashford in the ring to take it from him. And I think a lot of that is how his relationship is working with the fans at the moment. It seems like he is responding to stories all the time. He's responding and being defensive and fighting back against criticism and problems that we're seeing off the pitch. And I think if he took charge a little bit more and tried to guide the narrative that he is loyal to Manchester United, that he is going to be here for the long term to turn things around, I think we would see a different feeling around him. Most of what we're seeing in terms of criticism of Rashford is from what we're seeing on the pitch. I appreciate that. And he can only address that by changing what's happening on the pitch. But a lot of it as well is coming from this feeling that Marcus Rashford at the moment is almost lost a little bit. He doesn't seem to have any real guidance, and he doesn't seem to have the authority and the stature that you would expect from a player who is in the position he's in. He's gone from being this kind of activist hero to being someone that seems very defensive only a few short years later. And finally, I see the argument that people make. Maybe it's time for Marcus Rashford to move on. Maybe he can never capture the form and the talent that we know he has at Manchester United. Because of everything we've spoken about, he is the face of the demise of Manchester United, despite the fact he has been arguably our best player in the last 10 years. Maybe the circumstances aren't right at Manchester United, but for me, the idea of hounding out one of the few rare talents that we have had at Manchester United in those years, one of the few people who has consistently scored in big games, PSG, Man City, Chelsea, Liverpool, Arsenal, he has scored against the lot. Getting rid of a player like that and forcing him out the door with criticism that borders on obsession and abuse that is absolutely unnecessary, for me, is not what Marcus Rashford deserves. And maybe we'll only realise that once he's already left Manchester United. That's going to be all from me. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you in a bit.